What does it feel like to lose everything? To have the one thing that defines you, the very thing that makes you feel alive, ripped away in a violent, bone-shattering instant. For Jake Riley, it wasn't a question. It was the dust in his lungs, the permanent limp in his leg, and the hollow ache in his chest that greeted him every single morning. He was a man made of broken pieces, standing on a patch of land that felt just as broken as he was. Jake stood there, his back to the weak morning sun, staring at the inheritance that felt more like a curse. It was a skeletal horse stable, its timber bones bleached gray by 100 years of sun and neglect. The roof sagged in the middle like a tired old man's spine, and the large doors hung ajar on rusted hinges, revealing nothing but deep, dark shadows. This place, this forgotten corner of the world, was all he had left. That, and the old tired dog sitting silently by his side. Just 6 months ago, Jake was on top of the world. He was a champion rodeo rider, a man who danced with 2,000-pound bulls and always won. The roar of the crowd was his heartbeat, the adrenaline his lifeblood. He had endorsements, a shiny truck, and a future so bright it hurt to look at. Then came that final ride in Cheyenne. The bull, a monster named Tornado, spun left when it should have spun right. 8 seconds turned into an eternity of chaos. Jake was thrown, stomped, and dragged. The sound of his femur snapping was louder than the cheering crowd. His career, his dream, his entire identity, all shattered in the dirt of the arena. He woke up in a hospital bed to a doctor's grim prognosis and a mountain of medical bills. The endorsements vanished. The friends from the circuit stopped calling. He sold his truck, his belt buckles, everything of value just to keep his head above water, but he was drowning. That's when the letter arrived. A crisp envelope from a lawyer in a town he'd never heard of. His great-uncle, Elias Thorne, a man he hadn't seen since he was a small boy, had passed away and left him his entire estate. The estate turned out to be this: 30 acres of sun-scorched dirt, a crumbling farmhouse, and this dilapidated stable. And the dog. The lawyer had called him part of the property. The dog's name was Shadow, a fitting name for a creature who seemed to be a ghost of what he once was. He was a large gray dog, with the build of a wolf and the weary eyes of a seasoned old man. He moved slowly, with a stiffness in his hips that mirrored Jake's own limp. When Jake first arrived, Shadow had simply watched him from the porch, not with a wagging tail, but with a quiet, solemn acceptance. He was just another broken thing on a broken ranch. The first few weeks were a blur of despair. Jake felt like a ghost haunting his own life. The silence of the ranch was deafening compared to the roar of the rodeo. He spent his days making small, meaningless repairs, patching a fence here, boarding up a window there, all while the bank sent letters threatening foreclosure. He ate canned beans and stale bread, often sharing his meager meals with Shadow, who ate without complaint, and then would lie by the door, always watching, always present. Jake started talking to the dog, at first out of sheer loneliness. "Well, Shadow," he'd say, staring out at the barren fields. "Looks like we're two of a kind, put out to pasture." Shadow would just thump his tail once, a slow, deliberate beat against the dusty floorboards, as if to say, "I hear you." In that quiet companionship, a fragile bond began to form. Shadow was the only living thing that didn't look at Jake with pity. He just looked at him with understanding. It was on a particularly hot and hopeless afternoon that things began to change. Jake was sitting on the porch, staring at the stable, the symbol of his failure, when he noticed Shadow's strange behavior. The old dog, who usually spent his afternoons napping in the shade, was digging. But he wasn't just digging, a hole to cool off. He was digging with a frantic, obsessive energy that Jake had never seen before. He was at the corner of the old stable right near the foundation, clawing at the hard-packed earth, sending dust flying. "Hey!" "Knock it off, you old fool!" Jake yelled, annoyed. "There's nothing out there but dirt and rocks." Shadow stopped, looked back at Jake with an intelligent, urgent gaze, let out a short bark, and immediately went back to digging. Jake sighed and limped over, intending to drag the dog away. But as he got closer, he saw the sheer determination in the animal. His paws were raw, his breathing was heavy, but he would not stop. Curiosity began to outweigh Jake's irritation. What could have this old dog so worked up? All right, I get it," Jake muttered, more to himself than to the dog. He grabbed a rusty old spade that was leaning against the stable wall. "Let's see what's got you in such a state." He started digging where Shadow had been focused. The ground was hard, and his leg ached with every push of the spade. He was about to give up when the tool struck something hard with a loud metallic clang that vibrated up his arms. It wasn't a rock. He knelt, his heart beating a little faster, and brushed the dirt away with his hands. There, buried about 2 feet down, was a dark metal box, about the size of a shoebox. It was old and rusted, but it was sealed tight. A flicker of excitement, an emotion he hadn't felt in months, shot through him. He pried the box open with the edge of the spade. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it money? Old valuables? He lifted the heavy lid, half expecting to see piles of cash or jewels. But he was disappointed. Inside there was no treasure, just a thick leather-bound journal and a single ornate, old-fashioned iron key dot. He sat down in the dirt, Shadow panting, contentedly beside him, and opened the journal. The pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was a neat, elegant script. It was the journal of his great-uncle, Elias Thorne. And as Jake began to read, the story of a lifetime and the secret of the ranch began to unfold. Elias, it turned out, was no simple rancher. He was a quiet, obsessive historian and a treasure hunter. The journal was filled with research, maps, and newspaper clippings about a local legend, the Black Creek Gold. In 1876, a stagecoach carrying a massive shipment of freshly minted gold coins and bullion from a San Francisco mint intended for a U.S. Army payroll was ambushed by outlaws. After a fierce firefight, the outlaws got away with the entire strongbox. But a posse was hot on their trail. Legend said that to avoid being captured with the gold, the outlaws buried it somewhere in the vast, rugged terrain of Black Creek Valley, the very valley where the ranch was located. The treasure was never found. Over the decades, it became a local folktale, a story to tell kids around the campfire. But Elias believed it was real. For over 50 years, he had dedicated his life to finding it. He'd cross-referenced old maps, studied geological surveys, and interviewed the descendants of the original posse members. Jake's hands trembled as he read the final entries. Elias, in his old age, had finally solved the puzzle. He had found it. He described a hidden cave system, its entrance long since buried by a rock slide, located right on his own property. But by then, he was too old and frail to excavate it himself. He was a proud, secretive man and trusted no one. He feared that if he told anyone, they would steal it. So he created a final, brilliant puzzle, a trail of clues for someone he deemed worthy, a descendant who might one day need it. The journal was the first piece of the puzzle. The key was the second. But it was a passage about his own dog, a wolf-like dog named Ghost, that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. Elias wrote, "Ghost is the first guardian. I have trained him not to guard the gold, but to guard the beginning of the path. He knows where the first secret is buried. It is a bloodline of loyalty that will protect my legacy." Jake looked down at Shadow, whose ancestors had clearly been passed down with the property. The dog wasn't just tired and old. He was a guardian. He was carrying a secret in his blood, a duty passed down through generations, waiting for the right person to show it too. Shadow hadn't just been digging a random hole. He had been fulfilling his purpose. You knew, Jake whispered, stroking the dog's head. All this time, you knew. Shadow just leaned into his touch, his old eyes seeming to say, I was just waiting for you. Filled with a surge of adrenaline that reminded him of his rodeo days, Jake grabbed the key and the journal and went back to the stable. According to Elias's notes, the key didn't open a door, but a secret hidden in plain sight. Jake scanned the interior of the barn, his eyes falling on an old, forgotten horse stall at the very back. On one of the thick wooden support beams, there was a small decorative iron plate that looked like a maker's mark. He'd seen it a dozen times and paid it no mind. In the center of the plate was a keyhole, almost invisible under layers of dust and grime. With a shaky hand, he inserted the key. It fit perfectly. He turned it, and with a heavy, grinding click, a section of the wooden wall swung inward, revealing a dark, hidden compartment. Inside was not the gold, but a rolled-up, hand-drawn map and a set of old, sturdy digging tools. The map was detailed, marking a spot right in the center of the stable floor, a spot that was currently covered by decades of packed dirt and hay. It was marked with a simple X. This was it. This was the final step. For the next 2 days, Jake worked like a man possessed. His limp, his pain, his despair, it all melted away, replaced by a singular burning focus. He shoveled away years of earth, his muscles screaming in protest, but his spirit soaring. Shadow never left his side, watching from the edge of the hole, a silent supervisor. Finally, his shovel hit not metal, but solid wood. He cleared the remaining dirt to reveal a set of heavy, wooden trapdoors. Using a crowbar from the hidden compartment, he strained and finally managed to pry the doors open. A wave of cool, musty air rushed out. He shone a flashlight down into the darkness. It was an old root cellar, and at the bottom, stacked against the far wall, were several large, reinforced wooden crates. They were stamped with the seal of the San Francisco Mint, dated 1876. His heart pounding in his chest, Jake carefully lowered himself into the cellar. He took the crowbar to the lid of the first crate. The wood splintered and groaned before finally giving way. Jake aimed his flashlight inside, and the beam of light was instantly swallowed by a brilliant, breathtaking gleam. Gold. It was filled to the brim with gold coins, so many they looked like a river of solid light. He opened another crate, and another. Some held coins, others held heavy, solid gold bars. It was real. All of it. The legend was real. He picked up a single coin, its weight heavy and real in his hand. He laughed, a raw, guttural sound that turned into a sob. Tears streamed down his face, washing away the dust and the pain of the last 6 months. This wasn't just money. It was a second chance. It was redemption. After the discovery was verified and authenticated, its value was estimated to be over $100 million. Jake Riley, the broken rancher, was suddenly one of the wealthiest men in the state. But the money didn't change who he was. It simply healed him. He didn't sell the ranch. Instead, he poured his heart and a small fraction of his fortune into restoring it. The old stable was rebuilt, not as a monument to a forgotten treasure, but as a testament to second chances. It became a state-of-the-art facility for rehabilitating injured horses. He also started a foundation for injured rodeo riders, ensuring that no other cowboy would have to face the darkness he had faced, alone and in debt. And Shadow? Shadow lived out his golden years like a king. He had the finest food, the softest, bed, and a whole ranch to roam. But his favorite spot was always right by Jake's side. One evening, as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the renewed ranch, Jake stood in the exact same spot where our story began. He looked at the beautiful, strong stable, a symbol not of failure, but of hope. Shadow sat beside him, no longer looking tired but content. Jake put his hand on the dog's head, feeling the steady, loyal presence that had led him out of the darkness. He was no longer a broken man. He was a man who had been given a second chance not by a pile of gold, but by the unwavering loyalty of a tired old dog who had been guarding a secret far more valuable than money, the secret of a new beginning.